create a new reality, invest in your people, create opportunities for increasing social capital and trust in communities. I swear I did not line this up, but it seems to go well with the argument I want to present to you tonight. I'll just get right into it. One of my habits is to not advocate for ideas. I'm just a professor at Western. I usually spend time in front of classrooms full of students who are eager to learn new perspectives, and I try not to give my own personal valence to those. I'm sure I fail sometimes. But I'm kind of out of my element, so I'm trying out a new thing. I don't know if this would become a habit for me. I doubt it. But speaking of habits, have you ever been in a habit so much that you didn't realize that it had become a habit? Like you get into a habit, and then sometime later, you have this experience of recognition that, oh, that's a habit. Sure enough, I have that. Habits have that way of being in our lives. They can escape our conscious attention sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And as a social scientist, I'm not interested in boring you with boring text PowerPoint slides, but just to get some ideas in front of you visually as well as what I'd like to say, I'm interested in other habits that we have. As a species, we're animals, we're members of the hominids, we're primates, cousins, and so forth. And so part of what that means is that we're just built to develop habits for all kinds of interesting reasons. Responsibility is one of the things we've gotten into a habit of as a species, as in terms of an obligation, a set of obligations and expectations that is basically universal in all known human groups. So when we think about responsibility, what does that look like? It looks like a lot of things. To be brief, responsibility to self, responsibility to others, responsibility to our communities, to our families. We also expect reciprocity, that they will exhibit a sense of responsibility for themselves and toward us and toward community and so forth. We expect, one of our main obligations is to exert various kinds of discipline over our own bodies, over our own morality, over our own decisions, over our own styles of thinking. We've gotten used to being basically good at self-control. And part of what that leads to, luckily for maybe all of us, is a very high level of social order, of social control. So we're good at that. We're in the habit of exerting discipline within our relationships, working on our relationships. We're good at exerting discipline or exhibiting discipline in the things that we get good at in terms of what we like to play or how we like to play, and certainly in terms of the kinds of work that are economically valued and other kinds of work that are not currently economically valued in our world. We're also, as a species, we can't help it. We just are oriented toward meaning making, much more than we are toward happiness. Happiness is important for us, but it is not the most important thing. It's interesting when you look at the World Values Survey, the General Social Survey, the NORC data set, all these different things that I like to geek out about with my students. One of the things that is a through line over the decades since we've been measuring what people care about in terms of values across cultures, across societies, even across ethnic groups within societies, overwhelmingly, people tend to orient toward meaning making, toward having a sense, establishing what their purpose is in life, and having the opportunity to lead a fulfilled life with that in mind. And I would argue that one of the things we're also in the habit of is craving stability. Our habits acquire a stability to them over time. It's one of the reasons why we stop noticing that they become habits. But we require stability in a more general sense. And this is especially true for our children, that they require stability. They thrive best when they have stable situations, when they have stable relationships, when they have stable situations and circumstances in which to grow and develop a sense of the world. And one of the things that concerns me, and one of the premises I want to bring to you tonight, is that I might not be alone here in suggesting that all children deserve stable lives. But one of the premises of that, one of the things that underlies that comes with it, is that we also need to mean and to believe that all parents deserve stable lives. And that our society isn't set up to support those stable lives. we have failed in various ways to instill capacity and circumstances for people to live out the things that we're basically experts at already, orienting toward these habits of obligation and expectation. And that we've taken for granted, if you will, we have come to see it as just an ordinary part of the scenery. Some of the things that I say we need to kick, because I think we're in a habit that I think we need to kick. And one of those, if you've ever tried to kick a habit, maybe one of the things that worked for you was trying to just name it, trying to identify what's going on here. Step one, at least for me, has been to name things. And I'll just very briefly argue that if a stranger or somebody from outer space was to land in our society and learn by talking to someone on the sidewalk and learn that wage labor in our society is the main way that most people are expected to most of the time earn most of their income for most of their lives, they might see that as really bizarre. Perhaps especially in wealthy, industrialized democracies like ours. I would also argue that the patchwork of financial supports that we have inherited and that we continue to try and tweak in terms of temporary assistance for needy families, women, infants, and children supports, supplementary nutritional assistance programs, otherwise known as food stamps. These things have been super important, and they have lifted and boosted the lives of so many since their inception. But they're probably bound to fail, in part because we also live in a society that not only has acquired the habit that I just described, and of taking for granted, if you will, the mandate, the requirement to work in economically valued terms in order to have an income. I want to just let that sit and see if we can see that as kind of a strange thing. It's totally ordinary to our experience, but what does it take to see it as strange? One of the things that I would remind myself and maybe bring to your attention is that a healthy society, the one that generates trust, that has higher levels of trust, that has adequate levels of social capital, that can invest in its people, a healthy society that is active enough, animated enough to generate a new reality, probably should achieve health, if you will, by creating circumstances where people can live stable and fulfilled lives. So what would it take to start believing that each person is unconditionally deserving of a basic level of security? I'll give you a quick and dirty definition. I'm going to run through this side because I'm sure I'm running out of time. 3 minutes. What does basic security get us? Where does it get us? To summarize, I don't know how many academic papers, scholarly studies, quasi-experimental designs, randomized controlled trials in communities where an unconditional wage, if you will, but an unconditional payment has been made to everybody just because. No strings attached. Unconditional and universal. That it supports people's ability in general, not in every way, not in every subpopulation, but in general, the evidence to me is increasingly in, so to speak. It's not definitive, but it's increasingly in that it boosts people's capacity to live fulfilled, meaningful lives and to create situations for the children that are much more stable than the situations that so many of our kids face today. So what could this look like? It could look like a basic income, universal basic income. It could look like, we call it a lot of different things, prosperity projects and so forth. Since I'm rushed, I'm going to go straight to the big one, which is we were asked to bring big ideas here, so why not basic income guarantee? Let's let that stand for big. Yeah, you might be wondering whether this goofy-looking guy is suggesting that people receive a payment every month for just being alive, for being there, for breathing air. And you would be correct. I am suggesting that. Love to talk to you afterward. If you're curious about whether it would induce people to work less, it tends not to, as it turns out. Would love to talk to you as to whether we could afford this. It turns out we can. But are we willing to? And here's the thing. A big basic income guarantee, I know I'm out of time, works probably best at the societal level. And Gunnison is not a society. I'm a geek sociologist. If you ask me, I have to say, we're a community, we're a city in a rural area, and we are not a society. The United States counts as a society. At the federal level, what would it take, one might ask, to scale up the many different options or efforts to instill a basic income guarantee across the nation? And the answer is, we don't know. Sorry, we just don't know. We need to learn more. And we can learn more, most especially if cities in rural areas step up to the plate and basically offer themselves up as, you can call it a guinea pig, you call it a pilot test community, whatever you want, to figure out, allow the data to be generated, to be analyzed, and see what kind of basic income guarantee could work at scale in the United States. This effort's already underway. We won't be alone if we try this. The Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, MGI, a couple of years ago started off and ramped up. Now there are dozens and dozens of towns, cities mostly, across the United States that are trying it out. There are foundations, university-supported efforts, as at Stanford and University of Pennsylvania that I list here, and several others across the nation and the world, actually, who are trying to study this. Figure out what kind of configuration of basic income guarantee of a city going big could work in the most efficient way. And so I would close by suggesting not only would we not be alone, there's support here. What would it take for Gunnison to even conceive of attempting to take part in a trial like this? I think we're obligated to try out a different kind of society, because it's not working for way too many people, kids especially, who are unconditionally deserving of a stable life. Whether large or small, look, I think cities are laboratories for democracy. And although it would take a lot to figure out how our society could try a big initiative, I think it may be really a wise place to start. And what a courageous thing would it be for the city of Gunnison to give it a go. Thanks for your patience and for listening.